I'm Richard Tilley with Rock US. I'm here with Allen Benedikt of 12ozCollective. We're here to talk about his new shop, 12ozCollective, right? That's what you're calling it?
Absolutely.
So where did your print journey actually begin?
Tough question to answer because I have a history with offset printing that came first. That kind of segued a little bit into screen printing. As far as offset goes, I don't know, it just always kind of spoke to me, like the sort of blend between creativity and just like, methods, like structure, so it's very much like a left brain, right brain thing. But in any case, got caught up in offset. I used to do a little kind of graffiti street art zine called 12 Ounce Profit back in the day. So learned a lot about offset print production through that process. I mean, that was like back when you were actually designing and saving things to zip files.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that definitely dated me, but yeah, did that for a good many years, then kind of pulled back, then published a bunch of books, and then found myself in a career basically doing print consultancy for big brands in New York. Did a lot of stuff for Echo Unlimited back in the day, for Stussy.
How did those
Triple
connections
Five Soul.
happen though? From just doing what you were doing?
I met Mark Echo actually through 12 Ounce. He was a fan of the zine, so I was living in Miami. Every time he'd come to Miami, he'd reach out, invite me out to a meal. He was always sending me product, and he'd put a job offer out saying like, hey, anytime you want to work, like I got a spot for you.
That's
so
cool, man.
One time I got burnt out and hit him up, and so he's the one who actually brought me up to New York. When I got up there, realized that kind of their print production, as far as offset, was a little bit of a mess. It was all over the place. So I came in and helped kind of set that up for them. Consolidated everything to a handful of vendors that I had carefully vetted out, and just kind of extended their print buys. And then that got deeper in where they're spending big money on photography and creative, and there's a huge disconnect even in screen printing between production and creative. So I could step in and you'd spend sometimes 7 figures on a photo shoot, and anytime you go to a printer, they're like, yeah, I can do this, even if they're outsourcing like 95%.
Yeah.
So I knew enough about production to be able to call up a vendor, ask them for their equipment list, and work out whether they were the right fit for what I wanted to do. And then likewise, I could work with a creative team and help them define a spec that maximized the sheet that we're printing on. So in the end, it saved a bunch of money, got a better result. And so my kind of take on the whole thing is the money I would save them, that would end up being my fee. So I did really well doing that for a long time. And when it came time to, it's years later when I started getting into screen printing, it was kind of like, well, I can't really afford to put a Heidelberg, in my space.
Yeah.
It's a little big. And in practical terms, I was actually interested in screen printing, like as product and product development went. So I started getting into screen printing, knew very little about it. Previous to that, my only experience screen printing was like bootlegging punk band shirts, when I was a kid.
That's pretty much everybody, I think, really. Literally everybody has like this similar story. What really blows my mind, and I don't know if you really want to touch on this too much, but your intention to disrupt the industry, that's something that really caught my attention.
So that's kind of always been in my DNA, is like to shake things up, to figure out how to do things differently, how to kind of raise the bar, set the pace for everyone. And it continues to drive everything we're doing, including what we're doing here in this building at Sway, is to just have fun, shake things up, see if there's a way to evolve it forward.
Where does your ambition with that come from? Like, I know you have to visualize these things in advance. They don't just happen. They're not just manifested from nothing. There's something inside you that sees things that nobody else can see.
I think maybe at the end of the day, it's because I'm a consumer. I started 12 Ounce as my response to the graffiti magazines at the time. Is I didn't intend to turn it into a business. I figured I'd drop an issue, I'd shake shit up, I'd make everyone elevate what they were doing, and I'd have better like zines to read myself.
Yeah.
Same thing with what we're doing now. It's like, I remember, being a kid going to a store and you only got enough money for 1 or 2 t-shirts, but there's so many cool shirts that you don't know what to buy. Or same thing back in the day with like Punk 7 inches, it's like, oh man, like, don't have enough money to go around. So I don't know, like I feel like a lot of that's lost, like that discovery you know, that exploration of product, stumbling on something new, and then like having something that you truly cherish. Like I really enjoyed that and hope to bring that back to kind of the world we live in now, which is much more challenging thing to do when everyone knows about everything. Everything's fast track, streamlined, packaged, ready to go. So yeah, I mean, it's, again, if I can do something that really gets people like excited, then I know I'm doing the right thing.
So is that the reason you kind of went with the rock team, is because you knew they were kind of aligned with some of the things that, you know, your vision and how you're doing things?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I learned about rock through Ryan Moore, you know, all his videos when I was, you know, trying to learn the ropes of screen printing. He's got, you know, this massive archive of tutorials. You know, appreciated his enthusiasm. And then when, you know, he was pushing rock, and when I started looking into like what equipment I should buy, it just seemed to make sense. I mean, I assumed it was going to be better quality because it's European craftsmanship. But then when I started looking at like the specifics in terms of tolerances and warranties and all that kind of thing, it was just far, you know, above what the other offerings were.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, with Rock offering their 3-year warranty, I mean, my assumption on that is they'd go broke if they're actually flying people out all the time to fix things. It's more likely that the stuff just does not go down.
Yes, and that, I can vouch for that. You know, I don't see too many service calls that really require a tech. Sometimes we just send guys out there just to make sure that everything's okay. You know, and that's something that aligned with my personal values, and that's why I decided to join Rock as well. Is I like that they really care about the client, and when they say they want to be your partner in print, they actually mean it. You know what I mean? So,
and yeah, I mean, a lot of people can kind of beat their drum, but I do think that Rock delivers on it. You know, like the attention to detail that they put into their marketing, you know, into their brand development, into, you know, even the way their presses look, their user interfaces, all of that. There's definitely that much more attention to detail throughout that as a whole makes it, in my opinion, a much better package to buy into.
And what's your relationship with Portugal been? I know that you guys kind of go back and forth with customizing your equipment.
Right. So, I mean, we were fortunate, like through an odd turn of events, you know, went from just a small shop. Honestly, I mean, I bought my first auto to be able to experiment on. You know, it wasn't initially planned to be a business. I figured, you know, every now and again I'll do something for a friend, maybe a colleague. Started printing some stuff. People out of my old life back in New York City found out what I was doing, asked me if I could run some tests, and then that kind of snowballed into something much larger. Then that first summer that COVID hit, a lot of presses were down. We're out here in Montana, so we were able to keep running, and I just got pounded with work. And then kind of was like forced with a decision of either I need to scale back and do what I set out to do, or I need to scale up and start taking advantage of these opportunities. You know, then a couple of people, you know, actually people here at Sway came into my life. Between them and people, you know, out of my old life kind of reignited that ambition I had. And now we've turned it into something so much more than what I ever intended it to be.
That's awesome. Let me ask you, why Montana? Well, you know, going from, you said you were born in LA, you were in Miami, you go to New York, and then this is the complete polar opposite of any of those places.
It is. So, you know, I ran a creative services and strategy agency out of New York City. We're specifically focused on product development and working with a couple of Fortune 100 brands, some luxury brands, even some cool guy brands. I was living in New York City for about 15 years. We were based out of downtown Soho, actually. And I don't know, man, I just got burnt out. My kids were kind of getting to the age where I knew that I had to kind of let them out into the world. And
New York's not the spot for that, huh?
Yeah, no, I mean, I had my fun. It was amazing. I mean, I wouldn't be where I am had I not paid those dues in New York. But I was ready for the next chapter of my life, and for that next chapter, I wanted something that was the exact opposite of Soho.
Yeah, well, here you are, for sure, the complete opposite. Now, with 12ozCollective, what is your vision behind that? Where are you taking this?
It's loosely based on the idea of, you know, when we did a ton of work. Like Nike was our primary client. They basically bought out our capacity, and we were specifically tasked with their Tier 0 program, which is aspirational product in key doors of key markets. So I was always working on that kind of stuff, and it really kind of spoke to my interest and what I was good at. Like I've never been good at like super lateral wide distribution, you know, mall brands.
Yeah.
I was always like into highly targeted activations, highly targeted executions. I think my experience with Nike helped me fine tune that. So, you know, when it came to what I'm doing now, it's always been kind of like top tier executions. And, you know, when I left New York, I wanted to kind of go back to my own projects. I had reached out to some vendors that I knew of that were supposed to be the best of the best, you know, called a lot of friends and contacts and got, you know, them to refer some people. And at the end of the day, no one was really doing what I wanted to do. Like I was looking more for the type of executions that, you know, with Nike that would come out of either Japan or Italy, Portugal. And so there just isn't really a lot of solutions like that in the United States. So the same way, you know, I mean, Toyota or Chevy will get you to the store and back just as good as a Mercedes or a Lamborghini. Like there's a lot of people that'd rather do it in a Mercedes or a Lamborghini. So when it comes to the executions we're doing, we're approaching it that same way of, you know, and it's kind of like, you know, we talked about this before where usually you have either a contract shop or you have DIY printers. Like that's for the most part how it breaks down as far as industry goes. At the end of the day, people are set up to do what, you know, what work they're getting. Their workflows are based around getting stuff on press and off press as quickly as they can for the most part. So it's difficult for them to, you know, when you have a brand that's going to retail, that's looking for a price point, $65 or $120, like they're not really equipped to be able to suddenly stop and service that type of client and then go back to doing shirts for the Boston Marathon or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we engineered was as a solution is like, it's not sustainable to send production from the US out to Japan or Italy. So we look to basically replicate the type of factories, you know, the type of workflows that they have out there, but to do it here and then to try and anchor that segment of the market.
Are you bringing any resources from any of these other countries out here to kind of help you get that established?
I mean, we're anchoring it with rock, so that's the first step.
Yeah.
But outside of that, you know, we're working with Saudi. So, you know, our LTS system we just invested in, you know, all our mesh panels also made by Saudi, you know, inks from Japan, stuff like that. So, you know, I spent a lot of time just kind of deconstructing these sort of processes and these sort of facilities that are really doing the best type of work and trying to establish it here in much the same way that, you know, Mercedes will not import cars from Germany anymore. They came, they assembled their factories, you know, in North Carolina, and now those are made in the US.
Yeah.
But it's done to their spec, to their methodologies, you know, and it's still that same high-end premium car that it always was, but done over here. So I think, you know, as we've seen with these supply chain disruptions with COVID, you know, and all of that, it makes that much more sense to try and figure out a more sustainable solution to it here in the United States.
Yep.
And it speaks to what it is that I'm interested in doing, you know, even in terms of like the you know, the sort of ecologically correct approach to things. Like I've always seen it as a better solution to create product people cherish as more of a priority than trying to figure out how we can make this thing recyclable.
Yeah.
Because the idea is like, all right, you never would want to recycle this because you cherish it so much that even when you're done wearing it, you tuck it away, you save it, and it's, you know.
Collector's item.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's the type of product that spoke to me when I was growing up, and that's what I'm trying to do now.
Yeah, and I know that you worked with, you know, in the past, I've worked with a lot of brands similar to that share that kind of same vision.
Yeah. So again, I mean, all the Nike Tier Zero work, so we're doing a lot of stuff for, you know, Sakai. We did stuff when they were collaborating with artists like Cause or Futura. You know, Neighborhood, like Jun Takahashi. So it's all like really, really high-end stuff. And again, to me, it was the most interesting. It was the most fun. It's what it was that I wanted to do, and it's what I continue to do now. Now,
there's another shop that I respect a lot in Santa Ana, Liquid Graphics. They have a very dialed-in operation over there. You know, he's doing, you know, let's say 200,000 of this one design, then, you know, of the same company, like, all right, we need 200,000 of this one, we need 200,000 of that. Is that kind of where you're going to be scaling to?
I mean, there has been discussion lately just because we have some clients that are doing pretty huge numbers. Honestly, even in our new shop, it probably doesn't make sense to do a 3 million piece run. And there's conversations happening where they're asking about runs that big. We'll see if we take that next step. Right now, I'm more focused on just dialing in this shop, and then the next step, I mean, again, we've talked about like, as soon as we shake things up with screen printing and dial it in to, you know, to the quality and to the levels I expect out of it, really the bottleneck isn't so much the printing, it's what we're printing on.
Yeah.
So that's something that we're trying to solve for next.
Do you want to kind of elaborate on that? Or are you kind of
I mean,
not ready to have that conversation yet?
We could talk about it. I mean, it's still right now a vision. We're doing due diligence on it, but
well, knowing you, vision, it's already real. You know, it's right there in front of you. Knowing you,
we'll see. I mean, it's going to take a lot of luck, a lot of energy, and definitely a lot of money. So
yeah.
We'll see whether we can pull that off or not. But you know, I mean. Printing is obviously very much subject to what you're printing on.
Yeah.
You don't have a good canvas, then your painting kind of falls apart.
Yep.
I definitely see a big void in the market as far as high-end blanks. No matter how good we're able to dial in printing, we're always going to be limited by the quality of the blank overall.
Yeah, I feel like because there's so many of the same garments floating around, it's just the best of the low quality that they can offer. You
yeah,
know, I mean,
it's like most things you see these days where it's just good enough.
Yeah.
And
so your niche is far beyond that.
Yeah, so I mean, already we're working with a couple of factories on custom programs. The clients we're printing for, same thing. It's, for the most part, we're not using open market blanks. When we do use open market blanks, it's typically these smaller companies that are trying to push it. But even that, I mean, it's a step better, but it's not what it needs to be able to truly compete, you know, and create a solution, again, for some of these super high-end luxury brands. And then likewise, like it does hold back like what we're able to achieve on press. So if we can solve for that, then suddenly like the whole thing sort of comes together.
Yeah.
But my expectations is like, if we do manage to fulfill this vision and really disrupt things with printing, that will be the first thing that everyone else solves for. Solving for the blanks is a much larger problem. And if we can solve that problem, then it puts us in a strategic advantage,
Do you
position.
think that other larger scale shops will kind of follow suit, doing something similar?
I don't know. You know, I had an interesting conversation with a super OG salesman, been in the screen printing industry for a really long time, and he was kind of talking to me off the record, and I won't mention names, but he's like, you know, I will not be surprised if a big company comes along and tries to buy you just to shut you down, because you're going to cost all these guys a lot of money.
There's a lot of companies that do that.
Yeah, so, I mean, I don't know. I mean, we'll see.
So let's say someone comes along with, you know, a nice offer. Is that something that you would be willing to even entertain? Or are you just...
I mean, you can never take opportunities off the table when they're presented. You consider them, but like, I've never been one to chase money. Like, I see money as a byproduct of a job well done.
Yes.
Right now, I'm having fun. I'm trying to do cool stuff, and I'm trying to like, kind of put my dent on the world. You know, so we're in the middle of doing that now. You know, we're in an awesome position to really be able to at least realize that vision. So I'm just going to keep chasing that in the meantime.
Now, obviously you keep a lot of people with great vision around you. Do you kind of use each other to hold each other accountable to certain things and, you know, different perspectives?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know the benefit of having an awesome team around you, having that support structure, you know, having everyone who's at the table contributing in a valid way. So, yeah, I mean, you definitely seek that out. I mean, when I moved out here, it was kind of just to focus and get in my own head and kind of pursue some personal projects I wanted to do, and now it's grown into something much larger. But yeah, I mean, when you can surround yourself with people that have like amazing ideas, vision, talent, enthusiasm, it contributes in such a huge way.
Yeah, I definitely feel that energy around here too, for sure. How has your install process been so far with the, you know, bringing everything from Portugal to having it installed? We haven't gotten to training yet, but you know, we're going to get there with that. But how has it been thus far?
I mean, considering everything that everybody is up against in the world we live in now, it's been pretty amazing. You know, that building was completely custom made for us in the midst of a global pandemic. I think even if pandemic aside, we should be pretty proud about what we've accomplished in the timeline we've done. But considering that we are in the middle of a pandemic and labor is an issue, supply chains are disrupted everywhere, like it's actually pretty phenomenal. I mean, it's frustrating sometimes, you know, waiting on permits to get approved and issued or whatever. Like it definitely gets frustrating. But when you take a step back and look at what we've accomplished in this span of time, like we're moving at warp speed.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I think we talked about this before, is like the interruption in the supply chains was almost a blessing because it made you think outside of that standard box and get more resourceful with how you're going to get things done, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I try my best to look at the positive side of things. I'd like to think that it basically compressed the timeline, that the people who were not well positioned, you know, are suffering or just collapsed. The people that are well positioned are doing really well.
Yeah.
I think what we saw, like the people who kind of sunk and the people who prospered, it was inevitable. It just happened on a much shorter timeline as a result of this pandemic.
Yeah.
You know, at the end of the day, I'd like to think that what we're going to see at the end is probably a better industry. You know, people, you know, that are really scrutinizing their business models, people that are really like dialing in their business, you know, talent like kind of bubbling to the top, because just good enough is tough to maintain in an environment like this.
Yes, well said. Now, what advice would you give someone, you know, that I don't know if you personally printed manually, but as far as automating, going from a manual to an automatic shop?
So I did print manual back in college. Outside of, you know, literally not even a press, just a screen and bootlegging, you know, punk tees as a kid. In college, the first kid I met was Shepard Ferry. At the time, he had a printing company called Alternate Graphics, and I became friends with him, and so I would help him first cutting out those Andre the Giant Has a Posse stickers, but then actually getting school credit and making a little bit of money working at his print shop. So I think he had, if I remember correctly, like a 6-color manual, and he was just printing shirts and doing stuff. I would help him out, first printing his stuff, and then instead of paying me by the hour, I would just earn press time. So I started like bootlegging, you know, Krylon and Rust-Oleum shirts, selling those back at the door. So that was my introduction to manual printing. Honestly, I don't remember enough to really be able to speak.
Yeah.
But yeah, I jumped in with both feet into an auto. Like everyone thought I was kind of crazy, especially when I said I wasn't really trying to do a business. I just wanted to play with it.
Yeah.
It was a little difficult. I mean, obviously online, most of the information is in regards to manual printing. The principles apply, you know, fundamentals definitely apply, but you know, to me it was fun. I mean, like I said, the interfaces on the Rock equipment was pretty intuitive. Had a couple of people at Rock, you know, Ryan Moore, Colin, like all these dudes, Buck, extremely helpful, you know, always available to answer questions and talk me through stuff. And, you know, like we'd get jammed up, like, what the hell is happening here, you know? And so they'd help us out. And I mean, we actually got to a point where I was pretty happy with what we were getting off press, like really fast, honestly. You know, I mean, I spent a ton of money on printing and not super psyched with the results. And like, I felt like we were already exceeding what I was paying for, like within the first couple of months. Really? You know, I told everybody that my focus was on quality and I'd work out efficiency. I'd back into that. You know, that's still the way I operate, is I'm more focused on doing quality work and then backing into optimization.
Yeah,
and
then
efficiency.
kind of like figuring out where can we, you know, take time out.
Streamline.
Yeah. And there was something you did too that I hate to interrupt, but creating your own registration system.
Well, yeah, I mean, we didn't create our own registration system. We worked with Don Newman on his PIN registration system.
Okay, so that was his system.
Yeah, that was his system that we had installed. I mean, Don is also an invaluable resource, approaches printing from a very scientific standpoint, which very much speaks to me because, you know, with my background in offset, it is actually almost more science than craft. And he also has a background in offset print production. So
you guys kind of spoke the same language.
Exactly. Yeah. We did speak the same language, and we were approaching things in a very similar way. I just needed to figure out like what applied and what didn't apply. I mean, in some ways it's a completely different process. You know, offset's based on the concept of oil and water don't mix.
Yeah.
It's a different thing. It's literally offset, which means you're not printing directly onto your substrate. So there are those fundamental differences. But then in regards to like everything from file prep, you know, to looking at channel information, you know, like all of that definitely applies. But yeah, I mean, I spent hours on the phone. Don definitely likes to talk if you know him. And, you know, he's actually the only person that I'm aware of in screen printing that has won an industry award in offset.
Yeah.
So recognized there.
Yeah. Something I wanted to touch on, something I really respect about him is that he's not like Henry Ford where he doesn't have to know anything about what he's doing. He actually even just hire a bunch of people who do. This man knows everything about every step of the process, and it's at the highest level. So
I think you're giving me a lot of credit.
I've watched you and observed you. You know more about what you're doing, and you haven't even started yet. Than most of the shops that I've actually known, like people running production. I really like respect that you're like that.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, attention to detail is definitely everything, particularly in this where details truly matter. You know, some great advice I was given again by Colin over at Ryonet is that small problems in the beginning compounded every step to become big problems on press. Yeah. And I heard something similar in the offset world about that, and it's absolutely true. But you know, it's really like deep diving and scrutinizing those details and creating systems that can be reproduced that make all the difference in the end. So again, with Don, I mean, he created this pin system that isn't really used so much anymore, which is kind of interesting. And likewise, even in the US, there's very few shops that seem to be using the retentionable frames. We use those exclusively.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of like, you know, he's part of that old guard that approach things in a different way than kind of what we see now of like, all right, like let's just get this on press and off press as quick as we can, and it just needs to be good enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was sort of that attitude that brought me to where I'm at now, trying to do what we're doing in the shop.
That's awesome, man. What does it mean to you in your operation to have Rock as your partner in print?
I mean, obviously, we're anchoring our entire operation on Rock equipment, so it means a lot to have that support, you know? I mean, it's not anything I've had to stress because Rock has always stepped up before I've even had to ask, you know? So that means a lot, and I'm sure as we start really ramping up this new shop, it'll mean that much more.
Yeah, and what's crazy is you're going to see more and more support, even because I think that what you're doing is very, very unique, and they're going to be attracted to that and want to expand, you know, through your project, you know, kind of learn a lot from what you're doing.
My expectation of Rock is that partnership is a partnership in the literal sense. Is like, we're going to help you realize what you want to do while you help me realize what I want to do.
Oh man, that was well said. I like that. Yeah, and that's actually 100% true. My experience with Rock so far has been exactly that. Like, even when I have an idea, they're never like, okay, there's no like dumb ideas, I guess you could say. They're willing to entertain anything that you're doing and put resources behind it. It's just kind of up to you to make it happen, you know? And I think that what you're doing is going to expand their brand at the same time, you know?
Yeah, I'm looking to push those tolerances that much tighter to elevate everything we're trying to do and to have people think about screen printing in an entirely different way.
Appreciate you, bro. Awesome, man.